Welcome, dear listeners, to the first episode of Cockpit Leaders, where we dive deep into the world of sustainability and the efforts being made globally to achieve the United Nations 70 Sustainable Goals. I am your host, Gajanan. Today's episode is particularly special as we have a remarkable guest, Mitchell, who wears many hats in the sustainability field. She's a member of Global Shapers Community Advisory Council, a seasoned technologist, and a driving force in the field of sustainable development. She has worked with World Economic Forum as a community mobilizer and technologist, and currently she is leading the charge as a program lead for SA0, an initiative working towards a zero carbon, zero waste in South Australia. Mitchell, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Gajanan. It's so good to be here today. I'm here coming from Adelaide in South Australia. That's where my background is. And I want to acknowledge that this land has been cared for by the Kaurna people, the traditional Indigenous owners of the land, for the last 50,000 years. And we've only been here for the last couple of hundred years in Australia.
Great. So, Mitchell, starting with your role as a member of the Advisory Council of the Global Shapers community, could you share your journey as a global shaper and perhaps some important insights you have gained along the way? And how has being part of this community shaped your perspective on global issues?
Yeah, this community has shaped my life in every single way possible, I think. I first joined the Global Shapers back in 2019. I was actually a founding member of the Gold Coast Hub, so one of the first members there. I joined the Global Shapers because I wanted to make friends, and also Gold Coast was a new city to me. So I wanted to understand more about what the city is about, what do young people care about, and make friends. So then I quickly became a project lead because when you're a founding member, everyone has to do work. We actually started a podcast, and I was, kind of selfish, but I wanted to meet amazing people in the Gold Coast, and kind of like you're doing. It's a great way to get to know people and ask them all the questions that you want to know. So yeah, that was an amazing experience for me. I then became the vice curator for a little bit of time before moving back to Adelaide, my hometown, where I became the curator. So while I was the curator of the Adelaide Hub, I had the opportunity to work closely with our community champions and community managers at the HQ in Geneva. And that led me to understand more about the opportunities in the World Economic Forum. They have an early careers program where you can actually go as an intern, and they really encourage shapers to do that. And then that's when I learned more about the global part of the Global Shapers, because until then I'd only been in 2 different hubs in Australia and only met other Australian shapers. So after spending some time in Geneva, I got to attend the annual curators meeting, or the annual summit in Geneva. I realized that I wanted to do more. So I'd already been a project lead, I'd been a vice curator, I'd been a curator. And for me, the next step was the advisory council. So I represent our region. So the sub-region I'm in is the Pacific, or Oceania. We have 12 hubs across Australia, New Zealand, Samoa, and Papua New Guinea. But the advisory council mandate is actually really global. So it's really focusing on strengthening the mission and the governance of the Global Shapers community, helping all the different hubs uphold the values of the Global Shapers, and really reinforce that distributed leadership model. So like your previous series, interviewing curators, you'd understand that they're really the leads of the hub. But we have to have community managers, community champions, and advisory council to help support the curators and everyone else underneath that. I'm particularly really passionate about the impact of the Global Shapers, how we recognize when hubs are maybe struggling to get projects off the ground, or maybe they've got a lot of projects and they need help managing funds or partnerships. And so that's sort of where I focus on in the advisory council. And the Global Shapers, of course, is about driving dialogue, driving action, driving change. And it really has shaped my perspective in so many ways. I really love this question, so thank you for asking. The thing that I found about Global Shapers, like the best part, is the only thing we have in common is, of course, our age, like being young, but it's just that we want more from the world. We're obviously very happy, excited people, but we know that there's more to be done. And we want to challenge the existing systems, the existing initiatives and organizations out there to do more. And I'm an engineer. That's my background, my academic background and my career. But in the Shapers, when I joined my first hub, I was the only engineer. Other people were working in education, health, government, science, and things I had no idea about. And so when I was talking to them about my work, I was working as an engineer at the time in electronics and telecommunications. I was talking about 5G and AI and IoT and VR and all of the different acronyms and technology. And they were asking me questions that made me reconsider, like, if that was the best place for me to make impact. And I remember in one of our Global Shapers meetings, we had a guest speaker, and she was talking about the UN SDGs. Now, I'd never heard of the UN, like United Nations, really before. I'd never heard of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, but it really like lit a light bulb in me. And I was able to talk to the other shapers who are working in different fields to say, hey, I thought technology was going to save the world, but I didn't really think about how. I was just focused on building the technology. So yeah, Global Shapers really helped me see that there's bigger problems out there than what we're working on. And it really empowered me to actually use the technology and I guess study and experience and skills that I have to something bigger. Again, through the podcast, I was able to speak to that person in more detail and learn more about the SDGs. And it kind of really spiraled from there. And that was maybe 4 years ago. And I think every single thing I've done in my life since then has been focused about the SDGs. So it's really impacted me a lot.
Really amazing. People don't know Michelle. She's one of the most dynamic and amazing global shaper.
Maybe there's a lot of dynamic, amazing people out there.
Moving on to your impactful work with the World Economic Forum. As a community mobilizer and technologist focused on tech for SDGs and climate action, in what ways do you believe technology can advance sustainable development goals? And also, any remarkable projects and learnings you would like to share?
Yeah, there's so many amazing projects that I'd like to share. I think, to start with, like I said, I realized that I had these skills in technology that I knew needed to be used to solve these big problems. So it was my friends in government, in health and education saying, oh, you could use this technology to help me with this or help me with that. And I wanted to go to Geneva, where the headquarters of the World Economic Forum is, because that I felt was a place where the world is changed. Things happen in Geneva, things start, and places like New York and London and stuff. I mean, in the end, I really learned a lot from the Global Shapers. We have 500 hubs in 500 cities around, like more than 500 cities around the world, in hundreds of countries. And I'm really inspired knowing that we're all doing our best in our cities, and that's sort of the ground up movement. But then going to Geneva, I sort of saw the top-down approach. So, the World Economic Forum, the goal is to improve the state of the world. And they do that through public-private partnerships. So for me, I was really passionate coming from the private sector to see how we can unlock, companies' resources. They have a lot of staff, employees, they have a lot of customers, they have a lot of profit. So how can we use that for like the benefit of the world? And a lot of times companies, they ask that question, how can we help? So what the work I really went to the forum to do is to use that platform to shift dialogue in the right direction. I know a couple of years ago, net zero was a brand new thing, maybe 5-10 years ago. And places like the forum, they get these people together to talk about the concept of net zero and help start making it mainstream, to then catalyze the action that stimulates change. So that's the dialogue, action, and change that comes through the Shapers and the forum. And where technology really plays a role in that is to really accelerate those things, to help automate, make things easier. I think technology does one thing, it brings in a lot of data, a lot of information, but then you have to use technology to then synthesize that. So my focus was on climate tech, but one of the most memorable projects to me was not really technology at all, but I'll still talk about it. It sort of exemplifies the benefits of the World Economic Forum and the work that they do. So it's a project called the First Movers Coalition. So they recognize the need to rapidly decarbonize heavy industry. So you think about like aviation, you think about shipping industry, steel industry, they're industries that are really complicated and really hard to decarbonize. And so the First Movers Coalition recognizes that the people that take the first action and do something different, they're often penalized. So maybe it's more expensive to do something different, or maybe people don't understand it and so they don't have customers. And I guess the World Economic Forum realizes that in the economy, like in the end, businesses need to be, if not profitable, at least they need to break even. So At COP27, which is the time when I was at the World Economic Forum, cement and concrete joined the First Movers Coalition. And I learned a lot about this industry, which seemed really boring to me. So when I came from 5G, Internet of Things, AI, virtual reality, it was all very like exciting and sexy technology. And then they told me I was working on a cement project. I'm like, cement, that's so boring. Like I'm working at home, I was working on virtual reality. I didn't come all the way to Geneva to talk about concrete. But the cement industry contributes actually up to 8% of all global emissions. Cement is the second most used product in the world after water. And a lot of climate resilient construction uses concrete. So in places that have, flooding or earthquake risk, concrete is something really useful. So as much of the world starts using more of this, there'll be more use. So you want to make sure that you don't just stop using it. Maybe there's a green solution. So the power of these coalitions, like the governments and companies that are part of the World Economic Forum, they can get the biggest buyers and the biggest creators of cement, like other high emitting products. And they're committed to collaborating on technologies, regulations, and investment to decarbonize it without anyone having to lose their competitive advantage, because they did it all together and sort of made agreements. And that sort of raises the bar, because you have smaller governments and smaller organizations that can't afford to make green cement, but you have these big ones getting in a room saying, okay, we're going to do it and this is what's going to happen. So the quote that came from that reminds me of the benefits of these kind of things is a rising tide floats all of the boats. So if you guys do good work and sort of lift the bar, then other people that are not doing any work, they also benefit. And that comes to part of the just transition, which is a key thing in sustainable development goals. So that's just one of many examples, but I'll leave it there.
I have data for my next question. Considering the latest United Nations data, which indicates that modern renewable power accounts nearly 30% of the electricity, while transportation lags behind at only 4%. What challenges and opportunities do you see in promoting clean transportation or transport, especially in context of South Australia? And how can such initiatives contribute to achieving broader goals of SDG 7, that is affordable and clean energy?
Yeah, I mean, SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, is my really focused SDG. And it's about ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for everyone. This is actually this SDG is the reason I moved back to Adelaide. So obviously I was doing amazing things in Geneva and the World Economic Forum, but I did realize, especially through meeting global shapers from all over the world, that when you talk about energy transition, you can't even compare Samoa and Australia. Like Samoa and Australia have very different energy transition pathways and challenges. And you can't even compare Adelaide and Melbourne or Sydney, because even they are so different. And so the power of the global shapers that showed to me is that if you really focus on your city and your local context and your unique opportunities and challenges, then you can really make more of a difference from the bottom up, while places like the UN and World Economic Forum are doing top down. So in South Australia, in that context, we actually have over 70% renewable electricity in our grid. It's another reason why I came back to Adelaide. Yeah, so I mean, we'll talk a bit later about my work with SA Zero, but I actually also work in our local electricity company in our distribution network. So I'm really excited about South Australia's renewable energy transition. The average in Australia is 30%, I think, renewable electricity, but in South Australia, it's 70%. And that's only possible because we actually have the most rooftop solar panels per person in the world. And that is amazing because it's the decentralized energy transition. So the old way that energy or electricity works is you have the big power generators. You might have a nuclear plant or a coal plant or even a wind farm or a solar farm. Even renewable energy can be centralized and like big farms. But when you have solar panels, like you have 5 kilowatts here, 10 kilowatts there on people's roofs, then the people are really in control of their own power. And in South Australia, we have a really high uptake, thanks to some really forward-thinking government incentives that happened, maybe 10 years ago. We also have high uptake of batteries in the home. But that also is only possible because South Australia and Australia is a very prosperous and rich country where people have enough disposable income to buy batteries and solar panels. Also, they own their own homes and they have homes with roofs that they don't share with other people, like in apartments and stuff, right? So It's super different to anywhere in the world. I recognize that. But what we have to do is make the most of what we've got and see how we can help others. So having all of this solar means South Australia actually also has the highest levels of variable renewable energy in the world. So if you look at Tasmania, which is the southern island in Australia, they have a lot of renewable energy, but it's hydropower. And hydropower, a pumped hydro, is something that you can turn on and off kind of whenever you want. But solar and wind, you're at the mercy of Mother Nature. You can't just turn it on and off whenever you want. Denmark is another place that has a lot of variable renewable electricity, which means we have really unique challenges like storage. So that's, I guess, a challenge, but also an opportunity for South Australia specifically. We're looking at things like hydrogen, like our local South Australian government has announced they're trying to build the biggest hydrogen electrolyzer in the world, and also building the biggest hydrogen power station to like use hydrogen to power our electricity grids overnight when there's no sun, right? Yeah, so that's like my day job. But when it comes to transport, I'm glad that you mentioned it because transport and energy are really interconnected. Of course, the best way to get around is active transport. So we have a beautiful city here in Adelaide. You know, we have like lots of green spaces where it's safe to walk. I've got lovely weather, you know, so it's really nice to walk around. Except unfortunately, it's a very car-dominated society. It's quite a small city, as you can see. It's only 1.3 million people, and it's quite spread out. It's like everyone lives in houses. There's not many apartments. So people have driveways. They have cars. They can drive around. I've had the opportunity to live in South Korea, also in Hong Kong, and also in Switzerland, which have very good public transport. And I used to cycle and walk everywhere there, but here it's just not the case. So luckily, because we have a lot of renewable electricity, just converting those cars into electric vehicles is part of the solution. So I really advocate that this transition to sustainable transport shouldn't be replacing cars with other cars. Like no matter if it's still electricity, like renewable electricity, it's better to be building like more infrastructure for active transport. But anyway, I guess the last thing I'll say about the energy transport mix is that with the electric vehicle revolution, which is actually what I focus on in my role in the energy company, is it really is like a battery on wheels. So imagine a future where you maybe drive to work on a Monday morning, you can plug in and charge your car for free because it's sunny and your work isn't paying for electricity because it's like so much solar, we have nothing else to do with it except charge the car. Then you drive home, plug your car into your home, and instead of using coal and gas overnight when the sun's gone down, your car with the clean energy powers the house. So maybe overnight your battery in the car goes down to like 70%. You leave your car at home during the day and you can walk to work or catch the bus. And then during the day, your solar panels are charging the car again. Then it comes to nighttime, maybe your car's still sitting there, it's at 100% battery. So you can sell electricity back to the grid and make money in the peak time when your neighbors are maybe using their electric stove or something. So this is a future of vehicle to grid, which is where we're unlocking that battery on wheels. And for me, it just really sums up SDG 7 in the context of Adelaide, where you have that, you know, people have power of their own energy and electricity, and you don't have to drive to a petrol station with, you know, oil that's been imported from overseas. Like you really have control of your own energy. Yeah, so that's my answer to that question. It's a very long one, but it's my favorite topic.
I would like to congratulate your South Australian region for converting their dependency on energy 70% on renewable, which is very like a milestone for the transition for the clean energy.
Yeah.
Next question is about your current role in your profession. As a program lead for SA0, you are steering efforts toward zero carbon, zero waste in South Australia. Could you highlight specific strategies and initiatives SA0 is employing to accelerate the region's decarbonization pathways, especially in collaboration with the government and leading businesses?
Yeah, I'm super excited about the SA0 work. So SA is South Australia and zero is, you know, zero carbon, zero waste, as you said. So it's a public-private partnership cluster, and it's actually modeled off of the World Economic Forum's industrial clusters. So the work that I did through the Global Shapers and through the World Economic Forum as a curator and then as a community specialist has really led me into this role. So it's another example of how the Global Shapers and my, I guess, commitment to leadership and trying to contribute to the community has helped benefit me in the end, right? Anyway, so I'm trying to use that to help benefit my city and my state. The SA Zero is really run off a core belief that local problems require local solutions. So, as I said, you can't really compare Adelaide to Melbourne for a lot of things, like renewable energy, population. There's just so many different factors. So what my focus is as the program lead, I call myself the curator of the group. So we have a lot of organizations and governments, also universities and academia in the group. And I'm trying to help the group identify what are our common strengths and opportunities, because that's the things you want to focus on. There's always going to be challenges and threats and weaknesses, but hopefully another city, maybe another hub around the world is working on those, and we can focus on our strengths that we can then help someone else with. So some of the strengths and unique opportunities in South Australia, we have a very large small business community. So most of the big companies, big headquarters for Australian businesses are in Melbourne and Sydney. They're not in Adelaide. In Adelaide, it's a lot of small businesses. I think it's like 95 to 98% of businesses here have less than a couple of hundred staff. So we don't have like Google, Microsoft, all that sort of stuff here, right? That's an opportunity, but also a challenge, because when it comes to sustainability in the private sector and businesses, you kind of need to have people and resources dedicated to your sustainable transition. So the best thing about SA Zero and the organizations in our cluster is they are big, like some of South Australia's biggest companies. And they have a sustainability lead, and they have sustainability specialists, and they have budget to do these decarbonisation initiatives. But when they look at their scope 3 emissions, so scope 3 is looking at your upstream and downstream suppliers, and you have to count their emissions when you're looking at your emissions as a whole, as an organization. But when all of your suppliers, your upstream and downstream supply chain, if they're all small businesses, they might not have a sustainability lead. They might not have a budget to help look at decarbonisation. They might not be able to measure their emissions in the first place. So that was something we identified really early. And I think it's very important when we think about, net zero and decarbonisation, that we look at it holistically and look at all of the other benefits that need to come from this transition. So some of the other benefits, for example, are biodiversity, increased positivity for nature. There's health, so reducing emissions, reducing pollution, helping people. There's local employment and the mental health and well-being of people in the community. There's opportunity to focus on reconciliation and Indigenous land use. So what we don't want to do is have our, big businesses say, let's go net zero. We're just going to get rid of all of our local suppliers and move to those that are net zero, have report their emissions, because then these guys will never change, and then they'll have to close their businesses because, anyway, it's just a slippery slope. So SA Zero cluster is very early days, but that's one of the focuses that we have. Some of the other ones is if they're looking at their scope 3 supply chain, some of the biggest emissions of their organization comes from hard to decarbonize sectors like steel, like cement, we already talked about. And so these businesses are saying, oh, I need to decarbonize, you need to make green cement. And then the local cement companies are going, well, can you help me? No one else is doing it. And so that's where we're going to work next, which is looking at, okay, let's look at the hardest things. And because we have the government, we have the biggest businesses in our community, we're the only ones that can do anything about it. So I guess it's exciting work, and I'll keep you informed on how it goes.
Let's talk about the leadership in sustainability. Now, as a leader in sustainable development, what motivates you personally to stay committed to these causes? Additionally, do you stay in? How do you stay informed and continuously learn about new developments in the field to remain effective in your role? Because there's a rapid change in this field.
Yeah, I mean, listening to podcasts like this is one way that I love to keep up to date. But in terms of what motivates me personally, I feel like anyone who works in climate action and all of these hard, sustainable development goals, it can sometimes be really disheartening. It can feel like, everything's too hard, everything's too big. And so what I try and do is really focus on what I can control and what I can change. And that's what led me from Geneva all the way back to Adelaide, which is where I felt like okay, I can really understand the people, the environment, the ecosystem, the businesses, and really make a difference, here in this small city. But then if we all do that, like the Global Shapers model, then the world would be a better place. When it does get too much, and I've had struggle, even personally, because sometimes I feel like, and I'm sure many young people out there feel like this, is you always fear that you're not doing enough. If I'm ever relaxing, if I'm at home and I'm, reading a book, like I read some what am I reading now? Lots of Japanese fiction and like, Chinese science fiction, and it's just for fun. But then I feel like, oh, I should be reading, I've got this book on my table about, net zero business models. I should be reading this, but I want to relax and I feel guilty. So what motivates me is going to speak to other global shapers around the world who also find these same problems and same struggles. And then in doing that, okay, like, let's do this together. You're struggling, I'm struggling. Let's do the best we can. And then to keep informed and continuously learn, I love talking to people. So I'm an extrovert. I love talking and I'm very curious. So if I don't know something, I'll be happy to ask people. And sometimes I have a couple of people in my life, probably hundreds of people in my life that I've met through these different opportunities, that sometimes I'll set up a call with them or have coffee for no reason. Like, I just want to know what they're working on, and that helps me learn. Something that my uncle told me once is he really recommends in this age to get magazines and get subscribe to those magazines. And for me, it's important because you don't have targeted ads when you're reading a magazine, and you're getting out of your filter bubble and seeing different perspectives that you won't get if you're looking at news online, because it's really AI is targeting it.
So before we wrap up, as
Mhm.
someone who has a journey through various roles and initiatives like vice curator, now advisory council member, and through in your professional life also you are working uh, on the sustainable development goals achievement. What advice would you offer to new global shapers and young individuals who are just joined global shapers who aspire to make a meaningful impact on sustainable development, or in the perspective of a global shapers, I shape where we work as an impact areas, particularly considering your diverse experiences?
Well, I think I love the concept of think global, act local. And that's something that I recommend all global shapers to think about. It's December at the moment, and we've got a lot of project showcases happening around the global shapers community to see what other hubs are doing. And it's very easy. It's very easy to get inspired, but it's also very easy to feel intimidated when you see the projects of other hubs. So I would say if you really focus on your community and make sure that whatever you're doing in your hub, you're passionate about, then that will be making a great difference. I think the Global Shapers is a volunteer organization. We all have to remember that. Even my advisory council role, it's completely volunteer. So just like it is with all passion projects, you get out what you put in. So for me, I've always been, trying to lead a project or contribute to a project. I try and attend all of the activities that I can. I've been to Shape Asia Pacific recently, and also the Shape North America and Caribbean, my first Shapes, which is like the regional summit every year. So that you don't have to be a curator or anything to attend those. Also, please read the newsletter. For me, that's how I found out about the advisory council role. That's how I found about all these shapes and other initiatives. Like, if you want to be part of the Global Shapers, make sure you're using these opportunities that are here for you. And then maybe two more things. One, I would say, be curious in the community, catch up with the other shapers and let them change your perspectives, because, you've heard about my journey, and it all started from, being open to having my perspectives challenged and changed by the global shapers that I met. So, be curious. And then the last thing I'll say is, the Global Shapers is about driving action and change. So if you don't have a seat at the table, then bring a folding chair. Invite yourself to this table. There's a great example in the Adelaide hub. Our current curator, before she went to Geneva, she messaged the mayor of Adelaide, the Lord Mayor, and said, I want to make sure that I'm representing my city, and I want to hear from you about what you think young people should care about. And then she had a meeting with the mayor. I think we have a great opportunity to invite ourselves to these decision tables. People don't know about the global shapers all the time. They might not invite you, so you have to invite yourself. So I might leave it there. I hope that inspires someone. Oh, you're on mute still.
We have some time, so I would like to ask you a last question. Can you share some of
Yeah.
the interesting or amazing memories from your journey as a global shaper? Any two, three?
Yeah. I have so many amazing memories in the Global Shapers community. I think, recently, for example, I said I've been to Bangkok for the Shape Asia Pacific Summit, and I was at in Washington, D.C. for the North America Caribbean Shape Regional Summit. And my favorite memories from them are after the program's all finished, maybe on a Sunday night or like on the Monday when it's all finished, sitting down with shapers and really being vulnerable and sharing all the struggles that we're having as young people who are leading change. Like I said, I struggle a lot sometimes, fearing that I'm not doing enough because there's so much work to be done, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as young leaders, and it's just great to hear from other global shapers who are feeling the exact same thing all around the world. And the highlight would definitely be dancing. I love the multiculturalism of the global shapers. I love hearing new music from Latin America, from Nigeria, from France, from India. Like I love those moments with the global shapers. Um, I also, maybe selfishly, I took a career break last year. So in 2022, I was really overwhelmed by thinking, oh, I don't know what part of, the impact chain I should really be working in. Is it in government? Should I do a startup, or should I go and work in someone else's startup? And so I took a year off to like process all of this. And I had a lot of coffees with shapers and asked them, what do you think I should do? Or can you introduce me to someone? And I even spoke to the alumni in our hub. And yeah, I just learned so much about my city in talking to different shapers in my hub. Yeah, I think the dancing with global shapers and learning their new music and their cultures is probably a highlight for me.
So apart from a dynamic leader, she's one of the best dancers of the global shapers community.
No. All I do is
Yeah.
copy the person in front of me. That's all I have to do.
Thank you so much, Mitchell, for sharing your valuable insights and experience with us today. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. You've got me talking about all of my favorite things, from global shapers to electric vehicle to decarbonization and dancing. So it's been so great. Thank you.